All right, good evening. Welcome to the Buildings and Grounds Planning and Development Committee meeting. Today's Thursday, April the 4th. We'll go ahead and get started. Item number 1 on the agenda is the facility usage fee updates. This will be a report given by Mr. Keith Norwood.
Thank you, sir. Just briefly, we've been discussing this with Mr. Downey because you authorized him, the board authorized him to review adding 2 line items for our larger gyms and common areas. And so the results are on the screen there. It's basically equivalent to the fees that we charge for the use of the Bick Auditorium. It's in the same class as a couple of our auxiliary gyms that have stages and sound systems, and the commons area at Halton Middle. Likewise, for the gym at Halton Middle School, we're recommending for any gym that's over 1,500 and has some nicer amenities, including parking, which Mr. Downey pointed out, a rate that's equivalent to the Airline Auditorium, which is one of our larger venues. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just adding specific line items for those specific larger facilities. So no action is required, but this will be in effect for the current use that was approved for Halton Middle. That was the point of it.
Okay, so these new rates will be written in to the facilities usage agreement, and we do not, as a committee or board, need to take action.
That's correct. I'll get with Mr. Downey and Jennifer Carrier about adding those line items to the charts there. I think that's where that's disseminated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norwood. Any questions in regards to those fees, ladies and gentlemen? All right, moving on to agenda item number 2. This is Stadium Improvements Report. This will also be given by Mr. Keith Norwood.
Yes, sir, for starters. We worked with both Mr. Roger and Mr. Babineau to make a review of our existing facilities as requested. The numbers for the stadium capacities are shown here for all stadiums, just for reference purposes so you can compare. The request originated with looking at Benton High in particular. You'll see that their total count is a little lower than the other 5A schools. But the schools we were requested to specifically analyze were Benton High, Halton High, and we looked at Parkway by comparison because Parkway already had bleachers added. What we found is that since these facilities were built, that the code has changed and the number of required restrooms for ladies have basically doubled. And so there's no correlation between the number of toilets provided and the number that would be currently required. So they're grandfathered in, and you see the numbers there on the right-hand side. That's the number of additional fixtures that would be required to bring it up to the current code.
Question. Go ahead. Am I to understand these required additional toilet fixtures, while they would be required under today's rules, we expanded the stadiums previously, so that's what we should have and don't have, but we're not required at this time to install them.
That's correct. I believe that some of the expansions were done before this code went into effect. We did catch the tail end of it with Halton Stadium when we added some bleachers. We had to add some ladies' restrooms at that time. And so, these are estimates based on an 18 width seat bottom, which isn't actually realistic, but that's the way you calculate. And the cost, of course, would be astronomical to add this many restrooms. So we just wanted to report back to you where we stood. If we have a situation where we have a serious shortfall, we can run some numbers on a particular stadium on what it would cost. But this is really a summary of a summary, just to kind of get you in the ballpark.
Could I ask a follow-up?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. It would appear we need to expand capacity at one, maybe two of these stadiums. But let's say Benton High, that's what brought this all to a head. If we were to go up there and add additional capacity, that would trigger these 32 needed restrooms that were grandfathered, plus any additional ones that would be associated with the additional capacity that we're adding. Am I correct on this?
Yes, sir, that's our understanding. And just to put that in perspective, it might be possible to add temporary bleachers and portalets for special events. Several years ago, we were in the portalet business for a lot of our ball fields and activities. And since then, we've had a lot of improvements so that we don't have to rent portalets every year for every event. But that would be an option if we anticipated a large event, is to set up something in a more temporary fashion. But to put in a permanent improvement, we think, which would trigger this requirement.
If we were to go with temporary bleachers, would that circumvent the rules?
I think it would be a matter of interpretation, and we would want to get validation for that from the jurisdiction. You know, we would have, I don't know if it's all under the same jurisdiction, if it's because I think it originated with the health code or building code, but in plan review, plan review, it brings in the fire marshal's office, which has more than one jurisdiction. So we need some additional clarification on that for any particular location, like for Benton or for Halton.
And if there was any requirements imposed on us, it's your understanding a portalet would satisfy those?
Well, a portalet, and there's also, I don't know if you recall, we had some events a few years ago where there actually was a portable restroom truck that came around to some of our facilities. There may be other options that would be possible for those types of events.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bamberg?
This doesn't stop us from, if we take seats out, we can put them somewhere else. As long as capacity doesn't change, we don't trigger the need for additional restrooms
You mean within the same facility?
within the same facility.
Just kind of a reconfiguration?
Mhm.
I would feel that we would need to get a clarification on that as well. I think it would depend on the scope of it.
If we repair,
I don't know, repairs is a different category. If you're maintaining what you have, and Mr. Roger may want to speak up, he's evaluated all of the stadiums, so he's very familiar with them.
To your question, if we can make repairs, we can make slight modifications, but if we have to do something large enough for a plan review, it can trigger the code review, such as if we tore a large section of bleachers down and replaced them, even if it was one for one, it would have to be sent to the fire marshal's department and health department to have them review the codes applicable to replacing them.
and we just don't know how that would turn out unless we send it to them.
Anytime you send it to them, it triggers, and they could say you need to upgrade all facilities or other possible ADA situations. It can open up the codes to interpretation.
So adding one seat of capacity, no matter what, triggers these codes.
In legality, you're supposed to submit when you do an alteration such as that, adding capacity. So if I put in a new set of bleachers, I'm supposed to submit that to the state fire marshal's office for review.
A new permanent set of bleachers,
Yes.
not temporary based on event needs.
If we have event needs, Keith wasn't far off base of what he was saying. He's pretty much right on, but we would probably contact our local jurisdictions, fire marshals, and ask them what they think we need for those events.
So temporary bleachers being brought in for 5 home football games with restrooms as well, portalets if possible, could circumvent the need for 32 additional toilets to my numbers are approximately $900,000 worth of construction.
About 28,000 apiece.
Right. Okay.
We-
Mr.
we thought-
Buckhouse?
Is
Mr.
that
Buck,
gold?
That's the whole facility in conference, that's the average.
yeah. How about that? Yeah, and Mr. Buckhouse?
You say it could trigger,
It could,
But
we
it
don't
might
know
not.
unless we
but it might
done
not.
it. That's correct.
Is it, all right, so based on what, that exchange, do we dare ask?
For temporary,
Or even, I think Mr. Buckhouse was referring to more of a permanent solution.
Yeah.
it's gonna more than likely trigger a permit.
We can't find out prior to,
I can make a phone call, but,
Yes.
Well, at least, let's just at least ask. Just
Yes.
say, hey, it's, you know,
for permanent fixtures,
yeah.
Okay.
Say, can we add 250 bleachers for no additional toilets? Or whatever the number is.
yes, sir.
Or how many could we add without being subjected to having to add more toilets at $28,000 apiece?
No problem, we can do that.
thank you, Steve.
Hold on, Ms. Breathen, Mr. Norwood had something real quick.
I was just gonna say briefly, we thought we had already addressed this at Halton High Stadium when we built the stadiums and the restrooms, and so that number surprised me, so, you know, we wanna look at it again in more detail, but the numbers, obviously, if we're able to function without 50 additional toilets, then there's something a little off here with that requirement, so, we're operating in a vacuum. We can find out what's happened in other districts that have faced this and find out if there are some compromises that we don't know about.
Ms. Brother?
Yeah, well, Mr. Norwood, at Halton High School, we really aren't asking you to add bleachers. We need fixed what's there.
Mr. Roget can address that.
And
But-
what would,
but the
I mean, we have
issue
to add
here-
bathrooms to fix what's there?
You don't have to add bathrooms to repair a bleacher set, but if you tore it down and put new back in its place, it would have to have a review done.
So at Halton on the visitor side, to replace the rotten wood and create a stairwell or stairway up the middle of it, that was a
I
repair?
wouldn't think we'd have to do a full review. We're still trying to find a company that will even touch it, but of how we can modify that, yes, sir.
Okay.
Bleacher company will not do it without an engineer's,
And this is my concern.
yes, ma'am.
I just feel like it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. That's what I'm worried about. I mean, we can sit here and say we can't fix it, but whenever somebody falls in it during a ball game, and then we're gonna have to face the lawsuit. And we knew about it, and we didn't fix it. That's what I'm concerned about at this point.
I went and done an inspection for all bleachers in the parish, and I don't know if you may not have received that checklist. I sent it toward Keith, but it was for rails, it was for aisles, it was for seats, it was for structural bolts, the whole 9 yards, and the design factor. Halton's Visitor is the same design exactly as Plain Dealing's Visitor. It's the same design concept as Bossier High Stadium, so there's no structural difference in those. They're just I found 2 panels that were cracked that needed to be replaced on the visitor side. Structurally, that's all we found defective, other than no railing, which is a common occurrence to every stadium just about in the parish. So,
Well, I just know it's fallen in before. That's all I'm gonna say.
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bamberg, you had a comment?
I don't know if we could ask more questions to the state fire marshal about if we go 1 for 1, are we okay? If we expand, I mean, expansion at Benton is probably the question, but Halton is probably a 1 for 1.
We're fine, yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about if you have to put in something new, is that gonna trigger it?
It's multiple factors. It's one for, you're creating a construction project. So it has to have an architectural review. That also puts it into the bid factor, and we're mandated to hire an architect or engineer, professional services, because the dollar amount's gonna reach the 150,000. So it triggers several things when you get,
That makes costs go up.
yes, sir. We're not talking about a little bleacher set of a 10-row, 20 feet. We're talking there was 160, there's 170, 275s, all the same construction sitting there at 12 rows. I mean, it's 1,500 seats.
Gotcha.
And the fire marshal inspects all our facilities once a year, including stadiums.
When was the last time that report was?
He does it in the summertime, usually around, I don't know the date of his report, no, sir.
Do we keep those on file, Mr. Norwood?
We get them, I can go to the state website under our accounts and pull them. But we would receive
But it would have
those-
flagged if there was a
That's
severe
correct.
issue.
He
Okay,
sends those deficiencies to my office.
okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Ms. Smith.
So is there no longer just adding like to the visitor side, where they just evaluate the visitor side, it then becomes the entire stadium? Is that what you're saying? So just adding 250 seats to the visitor side, you just don't have to upgrade the visitor side like we did at Halton? That was in the ruling.
I think I can answer that question, Ms. Smith. Actually, the numbers are based on both sides together, and that can help the situation. When we did Halton, it was a combined count of home and visitor. That's the way these are addressed. We do have it separately, but I think for regulatory purposes, they're counted together.
Well, it seems like for the state fire marshal that we could ask for some type of exception on existing seating, but any new has to be met to that ratio. I mean, to add 52, I mean, you're talking 52, 58, 110, 142 restrooms for 3 facilities. I mean, that's, you go into the bathroom, there's not lines now. I mean, that's just an overuse, so it seems like there could be something done for an exception.
Economic engine.
Colonel Haddon, did you have a comment?
I mean, we can put out porta potties with windows, have them sit on them. That's what this is saying with the number of restrooms that's added, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that means everything else in the whole stadium has to be brought up to code, or if it's just restrooms, because, I mean, ADA compliance, if you touch anything in a stadium, ADA compliance is gonna be different than what it was 30, 40 years ago.
You're correct. They can review the whole area.
Mr. Norwood?
I was just going to say, I think we have the basic issues outlined here, and for the sake of time, maybe we could just refer it back to staff, because this was not really an action item, but we can get some additional information on the what-ifs for existing versus new and grandfathered in. We understand that we need to gather a little more information on that.
Before we move on, any other comments or anything? Mr. Roget, anything you'd like to add off of, thanks for getting those numbers together. I did get phone calls and texts that you were out and about on the stadiums with the measuring tape and whatnot, so I appreciate you taking time out to go out there and kind of validate this information and kind of get some good, accurate numbers for us to look at and consider.
Okay, thanks,
So,
sir.
appreciate it. All right. Going to move on to agenda item number 3, 2012 bond program proposed projects. I believe this will start with Mr. Norwood and probably involve Mr. Babineau as well.
Yes, sir. Just as an introduction, I'd like to outline what we're trying to accomplish tonight, and then Mr. Babineau really has the presentation. We're bringing back a recap of our remaining projects. And what we're looking for is some action by the board on the direction we'll take with the remaining funds, permission to submit that tentative plan to the Justice Department for review before we authorize bidding, and then permission to go ahead with the architect selection process, because the goal here is to try to get the projects designed and reviewed before the new storm shelter requirement comes in next year. And so that will save, hundreds of thousands of dollars in our building program if we can do that. And we're prepared to move forward, but we need your blessing on the plan. It was deferred last fall because we were under the new consent order, and we were in the process of submitting some things which are still under review for various reasons, but I did clarify with Hammonds and Seals, Atkins and Geist that we can begin the process and report without taking action on actually bidding the projects, so we can begin to move forward. So we would like to get some direction from you on what projects, those particularly associated with classrooms, you'd like us to start designing at this time. I'm having a little problem with my mouse tonight. It's cranky. Here we go.
You want to scroll down about 6 or 7 slides.
Here?
Yep, all good.
You have in your handout kind of a worksheet that lists the projects that we've been discussing. These projects have been considered for a while. They've been presented to you through this committee schematically on where we were going. And so we would like to get some authority for you on specific projects you'd like to see move forward. So that's the list that you're holding in your hands. So Clarence has a brief overview of each scope, and I'll just hand it over to you, Clarence.
All right. What you see on the screen before you is a schedule to complete design, hire the architects, complete construction documents, and then submit for permitting by December 31st of this year. If we get the plans into the various authorities, review offices, then we would avoid having to incur the cost of adding storm shelters. I spoke with Jerry Knuckles from the Bossier Permit Office, actually, and one of his others, Rodney Taylor. He said, just get it to us by December 31st, and your grandfathered in. So with that in mind, the schedule, this particular schedule was originally formatted by one of the architects that we've recommended for Houghton High School. Houghton High wing is the largest of the 4 remaining projects. This essentially would be the worst case scenario, all right? So the scope is to complete design, turn over to the architect, let them start. We go through a series of reviews and estimates, and at this point right here, this is the point where we submit to the various review authorities. This is the end of the year. And then there'll be a point in time where, and there's somebody else, oh, there we go. Included in this is a 60-day time frame for Department of Justice to review, and those would occur by this schedule. We propose those would happen concurrently with the architect doing their projects. There's a lot of work to do, and I think what we're asking for tonight is allow us to complete design and get plans ready for bid. That's really what it amounts to. Go through all the other processes. We would not go to bid. We would not authorize bidding. We would come back to you really at the beginning of next year, assuming everything falls into place. DOJ gives us the green light. We sell the bonds. We've got all those green lights going for us. We would come back for authorization to bid. We put it out for bid, and worst case scenario in case of Houghton is we could start construction by beginning of the 3rd month, so roughly beginning of March of next year, all right? And then that would take whatever it takes, and that line just goes on a little bit. Other projects, you've got 4 projects. You've got a small wing or wings at Cope Middle. You have a couple of different options at Bent Middle, and you have a little bit larger wing, about 12 classrooms at Parkway High School. The first 2, Benton and Cope, are smaller and can be done in a much quicker time frame, so we would certainly beat those times. We still would not go out for bids with those until we had your authorization, until DOJ weighed in, and until we had the funds to do so. But just to let you know, this Houghton is going to take the most amount of time, and still we can get those plans in by the end of the year to avoid the additional cost of adding a storm shelter. So that's the gist of what the schedule tells you. Any questions?
So basically, all right, so tell me this. We move forward through April, May, June, July, August of 19, all the way down to design, development, plan specifications. We're rolling into September and October for program managers review. At what point are permits pulled? Down closer to end of this year?
We would submit for permits, submit the plans, bring the plans to their office by December 31st.
Okay.
Okay, that's the trigger. As long as they're in by that date, then we can avoid having to, include the cost and designs for a storm shelter. So we would not pull a permit until after we go to bid and get successful bids. So that would not happen until early next year, assuming everything else fell into place. So you're not incurring any construction cost or anything like that. It's just get through plan completion, get it in the permanent office by the end of the year. That's
So our financial obligation and exposure this year is essentially the
It's just
design, the
design.
architect's design
That's it.
expenses.
no construction. That's correct. And then we have to come back to you for authority to bid anyway, so you have another bite of that apple. Okay. And of course, none of that would happen until we know we've got bonds sold, cash is in the bank, and you've got DOJ approval. Okay. Those are two other caveats that work into the schedule. So your exposure, as you said, is small by comparison. No construction.
And that exposure, that financial exposure that I'm referring to for architects and everything is already into these numbers? Correct?
Into the total cost, yes.
The allocated budget?
Yes.
Except for the classroom wing at Benton Middle School that was added most recently.
That's where you have an option that we have to discuss. That's correct.
Yeah, because something has to lose a couple of $1 million in order for that to happen.
Right. But if you decide to go with that project would still fit your overall budget. So the design fees would still come out of the allocated budget that was allocated in 2016. Okay. You wouldn't be looking for additional dollars. It's still within the confines of that $3.5 million budget.
Hold on a second. You're telling me the ring road, the sidewalk and canopy, and the classroom wing are all gonna fit in the 3.4?
No, sir. No, sir. It's a one or the other. Ring road or classroom wing.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. That's an option, one or the other.
Okay, that's what I
Yes, sir.
thought. I just wanted to make sure we had very clear understanding that
Yes.
everybody understands that it is one or the other. It is not
That is
ring
correct.
road, parking, sidewalk, and a wing. It
That
is
is correct.
one or the other.
Yeah. The point I was making is if you decided on a classroom wing, the design cost and all the costs for that can be done within that original $3.5 million budget. But it's still one or the other.
Right, the design cost could be done, and then down the road, we would just have to find the funds.
Yeah, once you
Essentially.
sold bonds, yes, certainly.
Okay, and then, but it would, the 2 million would have to come from somewhere. Yes, Ms. Smith, sorry.
Mr. Babineau, have y'all discussed with staff coming in, because I've just come here since January, so I know the original bond was for the ring road and the secure corridor in between.
Right.
So have you discussed with staff of Benton Middle School or Benton, whatever that's gonna be? I mean, it's kind of hard to make a decision. Do you need a wing there till you know what the program is gonna be used for? So,
Right.
I mean, are we moving forward with the 5th and 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade concept, where Benton Middle School will become the 5th and 6th grade?
Well, I'm saying what is going on right now is there will be no 5th grade movement starting in the fall. Okay,
Correct.
so for the next school year, it's just 6, 7, 8. Okay, for at least a year. And I think you have to weigh in on, our DOJ has to weigh in on that, if I'm not mistaken. So that won't happen for a minimum of a year. And to answer your question, yes, the 12 classroom wing came about over a year ago when the former superintendent had asked for some backup plans because he saw the growth patterns in a number of schools and wanted to know where could we put a wing logically. And so we did a little quick study on several campuses, and Benton was just one. And the staff there picked up on the idea of the possibility of a 12 classroom wing, and they actually were pushing that idea as opposed to a ring road. All right. So they've had some factors, or they've had a chance to weigh in on that, to answer your question.
So what is the functional capacity of Benton Middle School now without the temporary buildings?
Without the T buildings, Benton Middle has, I think it's 33 or so classrooms. Go ahead, Keith. I think Keith has it in front of him.
Mr. Norwood, functional capacity of Benton Middle School without T buildings.
Yeah, I have that. It was 31 permanent classrooms, and the associated capacity was, I have 735.
Well, our functional capacity in 2017 was 1029, so you're telling me that included T buildings?
That included T buildings, yeah. We're running two sets of numbers, and just to be clear, I'm very careful how I report those. I report them both ways to the Justice Department, and I have that sheet with me, and I can refer to it. We are carrying for, if we need to know what our immediate capacity is, T buildings are included. When we're planning, we take the T buildings out. We talk about permanent classrooms, and we have both numbers. And actually, I think that number 735 does include, it includes 4 modulars, so that changes the number from 31 to 35 classrooms total, because those are considered permanent. Here's the idea. We wanted you to know that you had an opportunity with the funds available to bring Benton Middle School up to equivalent capacity of Benton High School, which makes sense from the standpoint that you'll have 2 grades each. And we're going to be opening, if we do that 5th grade in reconfiguration, we'll be opening at 90% of capacity at Benton Middle School. So you have an opportunity here. It's not required, though, because you have T buildings there that serve the same purpose. We just wanted to bring it to your attention, and this started back in August when you authorized SGB to report back on the configuration. It said authorize SGB8, a joint venture, to bring back recommendations to implement site improvements. So we had already had the discussion with Mr. Smith. We had already had the discussion back in September with the administration at Benton Middle. Dr. Machen brought it up. He requested that we not spend the money until we considered other options. And so I just felt like I should bring that to you and put it on the table for your consideration before the opportunity went away.
And
Chairman.
hold on, just let me ask one more follow-up question. What is the functional capacity of Benton High School without T buildings as it sits now?
This is as reported last June to the Justice Department. Benton High School has 47 permanent classrooms, functional capacity 987, then 9 transportable classrooms for a total capacity of 1176. Benton Middle had 31 permanent plus 4 modular, and that's the difference between a functional capacity of 651 and the number we just quoted, 735. If you add the 15 transportable buildings, it bring them up to a total of 1050.
So you're talking brick and mortar, modular, and transportable.
Yeah, we have reported all of those numbers separately, so I have them right here.
So right now, I guess, here's where I'm at on it. And Mr. Bullard, go ahead. I'm sorry, before I get off on a tangent.
You asked my question,
Okay.
and I'm going to follow up if I don't hear what
Okay.
the full response.
Noted.
Thank you.
So here's what I'm trying to understand. Right now, if we don't even know what we're doing with Benton Middle School right now, as far as 5, 6, and 7, 8. The DOJ has us on hold. We don't know what we're doing. We've got a couple of things going right now. Is that correct?
What I understand is that right now it's just 6, 7, 8 for at least the next year.
Okay, until at least fall of 2020.
That's my understanding.
Is that correct? So in fall of 19, it's just going to be 6, 7, 8 between the 2 campuses, or 1, however they configure that.
Right.
And then in 2020, we still don't really know. Is that correct?
We don't know. I know the plan is they'd like to move the feeder 5th grades from the 3 feeder elementaries to there. But
Right.
that's a long range, or short range plan, if you will.
Right. And those feeder schools would be Benton Elementary, Legacy, and
Kingston.
Kingston?
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Bullard, do you still, go ahead, and I'm looking up something real quick.
I'll just a comment, Mr. Chairman. I think we're concerned about the same issue here. we have, if I'm understanding correctly, basic capacity, forget the T-buildings. 735 at Benton Middle and 987 at Benton High School. That is 17 and change, 1,700 and change. Our capacity at the new Benton High School we've got to be, in my mind, the middle school must support that high school in terms of capacities. And it would seem right now it is doing that. 1,700 would, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking we're not in real difficult shape there. What am I missing here? Tammy, am I missing
Well,
something here?
I believe that the goal was to remove some of these very antiquated T-buildings, and I don't know if y'all have been
Agreed.
there, but
Yes.
they are leaking.
Yeah.
They have, how many T-buildings on that facility? 21.
21. Oh, yeah, we're very familiar with T-bills.
But several of them are in really poor shape, so I think that that was the original, is to replace them and looking at the functional capacity that they had now. But, I don't know.
Will these two together, the combined campuses, does that satisfy the need today and for the near future? Forget the T-buildings, we take them out, we utilize the brick and mortar that's in place. And I'm not advocating one thing or another. Right now, I'm just trying to get clear in my head what's there and will it satisfy the demands going forward? If it does, then fine, we look at other needs. If not, then we've got to plug in, such as, do we do a ring road or do we do classrooms?
Mr. Bullard, if I could, real quick, I have some updated numbers as of February 1st that Mr. Downey just brought me and Mr. Stewart Thompson got together real quick. If we were to move 5, 6, 7, 8 in, according to what we would like to do right now, that campus without T-buildings would be at 83% capacity. Based on the numbers that Mr. Norwood just gave us for functional capacity without T-buildings, that would make that campus, between those 4 grades, 83% capacity. We'd have about 300 students to grow with.
17%?
Approximately 17%. That is correct. So just wanted to share those numbers with y'all real quick.
Thank you.
I think the ring road is paramount for Benton Middle School right now because of getting the traffic off of Highway 3. I've seen it myself. I have friends that work there, friends that have children that go there. The traffic situation is an issue. I think that is what we need to move forward with on this project. The ring road, and I would like staff to also develop an option based on the drawings I've seen of the ring road. What can we do to put gravel in the middle of the ring road to provide the additional event parking that Ms. Smith has been asking for?
Could you go to the, couple of slides up, Mr. Norwood, real quick? I've got a picture of that ring road.
Yes, up or down?
Go further down.
Just tell me when to stop.
There you go, right there.
Right there.
All right.
Can we get our
Okay,
people
to answer your question about gravel, keep in mind these are still practice fields. So now, if we put it maybe to the back.
Well, one of them's got parking right in the middle of it already.
Right, I understand that. You got some right there. This is a practice field, and this ring road cuts the corner of the end zone just a tiny bit. So we have to be very mindful of that. But, you know, at some point, perhaps these won't be needed. But you might want to expand some of these. I took your comment to mean the whole thing, and that'd be tons of parking. But if you want to, you know, do a little quick count, we can take the area and give you a quick idea of how many cars you could get there
So
if you gravel.
make that whole bottom right quadrant where it's already existing.
Parking,
Gravel.
right.
Parking.
Yep, okay.
Bring it all the way down to where that building is gonna be removed, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? The baseball team is removing that building?
Yes, it's supposed to be up on auction,
That's what
correct?
they said.
It's up for auction.
Up for auction, so all the way, this quadrant, all the way down.
Yep, that lower right quadrant of the circle,
Got
all
it.
the way to, is that Rubicon?
Yep,
All the way to Rubicon Road,
got it, okay, all right.
because that building will be gone. And then that will solve the ring road problem and the event parking,
All right.
in my opinion. I mean, please interject and,
I mean, I don't have I mean, I know what numbers you just told me, but I mean, I would like to see what numbers are fifth and sixth grade, and to look at that in 2 years, you would have to look at actually your fourth and third graders that you have now. You would have to get those adequate numbers, not just what the numbers are today, but what are they gonna be in 2 years when that plan is made, with the growth factor in there, to see if that would adequately, house those students.
Yeah,
I mean, I
we-
know Benton is growing, and I know we're continuing to add subdivisions, but,
well, and I think, and what I did is I actually have numbers circled at 2023 because that's at the end of the bond proposal. And then we would obviously, the rate our parish is growing, we're gonna have to go into another construction phase, bond construction phase. Mr. Norwood?
I spoke with Mike Hefner, our demographer. He still owes us some projections, and we've checked with our legal counsel. We are going to proceed with getting those soon, just to let you know, and that would help answer some of the questions. And in talking to Mr. Babineau this morning, we have a little bit of time on this project because what we're proposing, if we went with the wing, would be a standard design we already have. So it's not as tight of a timeline. So again, we understand what the questions are. We don't have all the answers tonight. If you want to take action on keeping the ring road, that answers our question on what to move forward with. If you're not comfortable making a decision, we could hold off on that decision until next month and bring back some additional information. If it doesn't involve classrooms, then we don't have this tight time frame.
Okay. Mr. Bullock?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Norwood, do you recall the approximate cost of the wings that were constructed in 2010, 2011,
Yes, sir.
29, along in there? They were a cookie cutter design, and we installed them at several campuses.
Yes, sir, that's correct. We had 6 of those. We referred to them as a QZAB wing. That was that was the basis of the Sun City prototype. And at the time, in 2010, they cost $1 million. Now they cost $2 million. And the price, again, was 3 to 5% inflation per year. That cost will continue to go up.
Well,
But
now,
we
we
could bid those
upgraded Sun
together.
City, did we not? I seem to recall we went with enhanced interior finishes, walls in the hallways and what have you.
The only thing we enhanced there was to add ceramic tile wainscot in the hallway to make it a little bit more durable. Otherwise, it was pretty much the same, except the interiors were changed slightly for the needs of that school. It's the same number of square feet, though.
Could we put that ring road in for 1.2 million?
At less than half the price? I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Newman.
Now, we'll be happy to get this turned over to an engineer, get some detailed plans done, and get you some more detailed estimates. Right now, we just have that and some basic unit costs. But keep in mind, that road is about half a mile long, and that cost includes a couple of the components that are necessary. You've got a canopy along here, so students can be dropped off, and then new canopies and sidewalks to the current middle school, and a new canopy and sidewalk to the current high school. So in case we have downpours, the kids can walk under cover. So those are some of the components of that piece.
Ms. Smith?
I mean, I'm personally not ready to give staff to make a decision tonight on which way, because I think that the traffic of what we see today is gonna be completely different, because you're talking about dividing it between 2 campuses, where now you're looking at it all shoved into one campus, plus you're looking at high school students that are all lined up and parents still picking up high school students. So, I don't know how much,
work y'all done on a traffic study to just look at that number of students and being divided into the two programs and how the traffic flow would work differently than it works today?
What we did is we looked at Benton Middle School and extrapolated, because we know we have 3 grades there functioning. The enrollment will go up and it'll drop to 2 grades, but still fairly similar in the way it operates. And so, honestly, the traffic engineer that looked at that, I questioned his queuing links, because they seem to imply that all the cars were gonna be there at once, which isn't the case. And I emphasized that we needed to really almost observe, a semester and see what's really going on before we could validate his assumptions. We really don't think it's gonna require the queuing links that he had lined out, but you still will need a certain length of pavement to get from point A to point B regardless. We talked about circulating traffic at the current student parking lot there to get it off of Highway 3. That would be an option. There are other options to have a shorter loop in the back, utilizing the north road that goes around to the Benton Middle Cafeteria. This one, with all our study, just seemed to be the most practical for traffic flow, but it is at a pretty significant cost. And the funding was allocated for it, so that's why it was taken to this point. That's why we even did the traffic study.
Mr. Cheatham.
I think it's too early to go forward with a ring road or with a wing. I think we're gonna find out they don't need this wing as it's written. Mike could cut out part of it and just have it connect all the way through, so that might save some money. I just don't think we need to rush into, if we were gonna rush into anything on it, I would say rush in towards building a wing, because we probably will need a wing in 2028, but like Mr. Newman says, we're gonna have another bond by that time. I don't think we'll need another wing before 2023, but I also am not sold on us needing this full ring road and the amount of money it's gonna cost. So just my 2 cents, but I think once we get approval from the DOJ and we know whether it's gonna be a 5 and 6 and a 7 and 8, or is it just gonna be a 6, 7, and 8? If it's just gonna be a 6, 7, and 8 center, you're not gonna need a wing. But if it's gonna be 5, 6, 7, 8, and it's gonna grow, you're probably gonna need a wing. So we just don't know. We're kinda putting the cart before the horse, in my opinion. I think we maybe, on this particular project, could slow down a little bit and find out what the layout's gonna be. Is it gonna be 5, 6, 7, 8, before we go spending money and then having to double spend it? Because more than likely, we would end up doing both of these projects in some form, and I just don't think we wanna jump and get it wrong.
Mr. Bamberg.
Mr. Babineau, has there been, I know they pushed this back once already, the code for the building to be tornado-proof. Have you heard any thoughts that it could be pushed again, or do they feel like this is kind of a hard line this time?
I had a colleague sit in on the meeting of that code council, and what he told me is there was, at the time, they weren't even sure they were gonna rescind it for this year. There was a push from some members, it's in the books, let's just move forward with it, to heck with everyone's budgets. So based on that conversation, what he relayed to me, I'd be hard pressed to believe they would delay it again. Now, if enough people in your position called on the governor's office and said, we got a problem, you gotta help us.
Is this legislative, or who makes this decision?
Well, it came about because the governor signed into law an updated version of the International Building Code. That's what governs all buildings throughout the state. There's a council that sort of puts all that together, and they voted to rescind that one chapter of the building code that dealt only with storm shelters. Okay. And so that's all they took action on. The new code is in place, period. That one chapter is the only thing that was temporarily rescinded.
Because it has the
I
most
would not bet
cost
on it.
associated with it?
I'm sorry?
Because it has the most cost associated with it?
Yes. I think a lot of people were caught flat-footed because so many budgets are developed years before this went into effect. such as yours. And you're not the only school system. It's school systems and police departments and 911 centers and buildings of that type. There's multiple building types that require storm shelters now, okay? So it would take people in your position, elected people around the state, a concerted effort to get together and make a good argument. That's what it would take.
That it's gonna stifle building across the state, and surely you don't wanna do that.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can either of you tell me when our next update, or Will, Mr. Self, you might have to chip in here, from the DOJ is on the situation with the 5th and 6th Center?
That, I believe, is going to be a question from Mr. Canesha. That's been sent, hasn't it?
Where are
moving
we?
the 5th grade
Behind
to
you.
Benton Middle?
Let's see if Mr.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. I didn't see it here.
That's really going to be a question for the, John and all of
Okay.
the Baton Rouge office, but from my understanding of what I know is that, that got pushed, to move the deadline for the, from the April trial that we had because of the, government shutdown.
Right.
So it'll be whenever they
Okay,
reset.
and that's what I wanted to double check, and that's what I wanted to hear, that's been pushed back and we're fine with that. Mr. Downey?
It all got included into that one request because the Department of Justice would not consider one request at a time. They wanted it all together in a package, and so it got bundled, which got pushed back to September.
Okay, all right, so there we are with that. So, I guess for the Benton Middle, I think it's kind of the consensus that we just kind of table everything and wait until we get some good traffic ideas from the new change to the new high school, the new middle school setup. So, I guess for this subtopic, with Benton Middle School subtopic within this agenda item, we're gonna kind of be on hold with everything right now. Is that kind of what the committee's thinking right there? Okay, Mr. Babineau, Mr. Norwood, y'all understand that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, let's move on with Cope Middle School.
Right. Next slide, please. There we go. All right. Cope has a budget of $2,200,000. We've allocated $70,500 to build a secure entrance. Those plans are about 95% complete, and that'll be a summer project, so it won't disturb the activities of the school during the school year. That leaves a balance of $2,129,500 for the project, which is primarily for a 2-classroom wing and some restrooms and a band space, or a larger band room, if you will. We've had some conversations with the school administration. They would like to also enclose their commons. They'd like some ensemble practice rooms, and the practical solution there is to take the old band room, if we build a new one, and subdivide it to small practice rooms. And then what we've done on many of their projects is do an additive alternate for additional classrooms. You may recall the last time we bid a wing, which was Sun City, the base bid was 10 classrooms, and then we had an additive alternate for 2 classrooms. The base cost for 10 was closing on $200,000 per room, and the contractor's proposal to add 2 more was $100,000 per room. So it was great value, and the board accepted that project. So the way we would handle all the requests, if we think they're practical and reasonable, and I think these probably are, is we would design the things they really need. That's the wing and the band, and then add these other 3 items as additive alternates. State law allows you to have 3 additive alternates on a public project. That's 1, 2, 3. That would fill the void, and then we take bids, and once we know the prices, if they fall in the budget, we bring that back to you, and you can weigh in on whether to accept or not accept. Okay.
So to make sure I understand it right, we're gonna, the wing and band room, we're building a new band room wing with 2 possible classrooms, but the basis of this is a new wing and band room.
I've got,
Y'all have any preliminary
I'll show
drawings
you.
or
Right there.
walk us through that so everybody's up to speed?
Sure, okay. What was requested initially was just, please enlarge the band room, because they had a certain number of students they wanted to accommodate, and the current room just wasn't functionally large enough, all right? So what they asked for was basically about a 400 or 500 square foot addition. We thought about putting it over here. Once we got into doing some code research, this campus, this whole school is not fire sprinklered. And so it's one of those things where if you add on to something, like in a larger room, you trigger a code update, which means fire sprinkling everything, and that's a huge cost. What we can do, the workaround, is you put a 2-hour fire separation, and then you can add a band room. So this represents what they will require in a larger band room, okay? And then on this end, you've got a couple of T buildings. These classrooms would replace the 2 T buildings they've got. The other need they have is for additional restrooms. The school overall has enough restrooms based on code. The problem is you've got a group here. This is the classroom wing. This whole area are classrooms. These bathrooms are right in the middle. Then you've got another large set of bathrooms over here. Of course, this is your gym, and so that's why they're there. So overall, the campus has plenty, but their locker periods are so short, the students have to crowd into this one, and there are long lines in both. So the principal asked us to please consider adding some restrooms. So if we do that, we would do it in conjunction with a classroom addition. Again, there'd be a 2-hour fire separation, so it would not trigger a code update of the existing building.
Okay.
All right.
Ms. Brotherton?
Mr. Babineau, since we're adding a couple of classrooms, would that storm shelter apply to any of that?
Our goal is to, if we get these plans in before the end of the year, we don't have to worry about that. That's the whole crux of why we're here today, is all these projects, getting them in, hiring the architects, getting the plans complete, and getting them bid ready, going to the code reviewers by the end of the year, will avoid that cost. Because I can tell you on a small project, the percentage increase is going to be pretty significant.
No. Ms. Smith?
Mr. Babineau, has there not been a plan looked at where instead of doing 2 additions like that, it can be included as one?
Yes, we actually looked at that. I don't have this in the set. There's 2 options. One is to put it right here, or to put it over here. All right. Likely, and I've talked to Mr. Downey, the better idea really, if you're going to combine it, is put it right there, and just put a sound separation between a band room and a classroom. The only downside to that is they need the restrooms over here. So what we might consider doing is, if we do that, combine 2 classrooms and a band room, is look at trying to do just a separate restroom right there, so that the kids don't crowd into the restrooms that are located right here. But yes, to answer your question, we have absolutely.
But not all the construction can be done in one location. We can't centralize all the construction to one location. I think
You
that
could,
was,
I mean, you could conceivably say, well,
That's
it's the
what
band
you're-
room over here.
Yeah, he
The
understood
only
the
problem with the
question.
band room over here is the band rooms work best where they're near their performance space. The performance space of the school is the stage right here on the gym, next to the gym. So this is the band room, this is the choir room, here's the hallway, and this is your gym. And so it's easier for the students to move their instruments back and forth. But to answer your question, yeah, if you want to put it over here, it's just a matter of they have a little bit further to walk. That's the only downside. And so you could actually just build one building, yes.
but the funding is allocated in line for that project, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's worthy of
Right.
moving forward,
And what
keeping
we'll
it
do
as is.
is refine the plans, get some more detailed estimates, and then bring you back some options for, do we do this, or do we put it together as one, maybe try to save a few dollars in the process.
All right. Mr. Backhouse?
Has the administration been showed this? Do they have a preference on where they would like it?
This is something we just developed, but we had a conversation with the administration, and at the time it was put classrooms and restrooms here, and they've seen that plan. And at the time it was just add on to the band. But more recently, since we've been, the last B&G meeting where we gave you the update about what was happening with the storm shelter code, this came about, and we haven't had a chance to go back, but we will have that conversation. In fact, I have a meeting at the school Monday at 10, and we'll talk about this as well.
Okay, just
Thank you.
report that back to us at
Yes,
the
sir.
next committee meeting. Okay.
Need a motion?
Well, they're all subtopics, it's all going to be. Next subtopic is, in this agenda item, is Halton High School.
Yep.
Classroom wing, admin building, sidewalks, canopies, auditorium, demolition, sidewalks, canopies,
Right.
a lot.
Okay. This is a summary. The total project budget is $16,500,000. Of that, about a year or two ago, 35,000 change was spent for some drainage improvements. You may recall that about a year and a half or two ago, there were 4 artificial turf fields designed for 4 different schools, and then it stopped at the end of documents. It wasn't built. Of course, that cost is still attributable to this project. And then, of course, about a year or so ago, we built a new concession stand for $368,000. That leaves a balance of $16,039,000. for the next project. This last bullet, over the last year and a half, we've had a number of meetings with the school administration, and we looked at a number of different options. The options are presented in here for your consideration. The most recent was a classroom wing and an admin building, just kind of bring it up to current, okay? And there's a design on the next slide to show you classroom wing. All right. Okay, a little background just for some of the newer members who weren't here when we did this originally. This was a long-range plan of Houghton. The central question here is, can you add on to the campus in a logical way to eventually get it to a school of 2,000 students? 2,000 is sort of the number we're using as target enrollments for all your high schools eventually, all right? So, and of course the question was, yes. Again, this is all long range. This is not to be funded out of the current bond program. This may take 10 years, 20 years, however long it takes to get Houghton to a campus of 2,000 students, but it shows you a logical methodology to get there. Where we're concentrating today is looking at a wing without having to tear down any classroom wing. The idea is you would tear down this auditorium, and this wing would be built in that footprint, roughly on the edge of the parking lot. This is the current admin building. And after a more recent conversation with the school, they'd like a new wing. And Mr. Norwood, if you go up two more slides. There we go, right there. All right. This is where we've had the most recent conversation with the school administration. The idea initially was renovate the current admin, add to the admin, and then build a new wing on the end of that, which would essentially go up to this point. After the last meeting, I had a phone call with the principal. He would prefer to repurpose those spaces for other uses, perhaps some of that are already in H-wing, some storage spaces, some testing rooms, any other purposes that they may need on the campus that could be housed in that, and then simply to build a new admin wing on this end, whether it's here or whether we wrap it around. This is the current library. This is the footprint for a new 2-story classroom wing. That's 30 standard classrooms plus 2 smaller classrooms. They have endorsed this particular plan. They like this layout. The unknown part was this. We've done some very preliminary cost estimating, and right now that would fit within the funds available. That's the reserve. You saw the $16,039,000.
So
yeah.
This 2019 project cost estimate of 15.4 million,
Right.
It includes everything that you just discussed right here that you've vetted through the staff.
That's the wing. That's an admin building. There would have to be some parking modifications. Okay, we've got to take a little bit of parking out. I've included replacing some of what we take out so there's not a net loss of parking on the campus. We've got to modify this drop-off drive a little bit. The idea was to let parents drop off here, let students enter at this point. Of course, the buses come right here. The idea of the admin in this location is they can sort of monitor bus traffic and car traffic from one location, and they're right in the middle of the newest student center, if you will. Also, some demolition. We've got to demolish the auditorium building, and if and when the time comes, we would look at demolition of the H building after this was completed. We also received a request from the principal to look at a 3-story building in the same footprint. The idea was we would lose less parking. We actually did a quick floor plan of that, did a quick estimate. The problem with that, and it's a good idea, it takes a smaller footprint, but because it's 3 stories, 3 sets of stairs, elevators, restrooms, corridors, it adds about 4,000 feet, and that adds about $1 million to the cost. It would be over your budget, unless for some reason there was an extra $1 million floating around that I don't know about. So I gave them that information, but right now this is what fits within the funds.
And have we started on the actual design or anything, or that's tonight, if we move forward, that design will begin and this project will start to gain some traction?
The office is simply a blank. That's it.
Okay.
Now, this footprint is based off the same admin footprint at the new Benton High School. Same size, same basic layout.
Okay.
So they're all equal.
And these additional classrooms are expected to meet the growing capacity out there, is that?
2 points on that. One is it replaces long range, the 11 classrooms out of the H building. So it's partial, it's growth and replacement for very old classrooms, plus some of the T buildings that are on that campus. There's 2 or 3 T buildings on the campus right now. So at least half of the wing is for replacement of what's there now.
Now, I know the auditorium is pretty much condemned. Is the H building condemned, or are they still using it? Okay.
Yeah, they're using it.
I think this one needs to move forward as is, just like the Cope Middle School does. I think we need to leave this one as it is, and at the end, when we go through all of these, I want to come back and we're going to kind of prioritize these as far as funds available, first funds available go here and are dedicated to these certain ones.
Understood. All right.
Okay. Any other, we're good, moving forward? All right. Last subtopic here, Parkway High School.
Go up about 4 or 5 slides, Mr. Norwood. There you go. All right. Parkway. Approved budget was $6.5 million. $251 was spent for the annual lane extension. $430 was spent for the concessions and restrooms, and the same $59,000 for the turf field, leaving a balance of $5.75 million for the wing. I've got a little image of the wing on the next slide. Here we go. This is when we spent some time on looking at how many different options for wing locations. Most of you are probably aware that that's a fairly tight campus. There's limited locations where we might put a wing. And the point of this campus as well is long range. You know, your goal is to grow your high schools to 2,000 students. And how do you do that in a simple and cohesive fashion? What we settled on as a proposed idea is this is the end of the wings. This is the east side of the campus. This is where the buses pick up. And this whole piece would be a wing. This is 2 stories. Of course, your existing wings are 2 stories. It'll be connected by a covered canopy to the new wing. What you see in the light gray would be the first 12. This would be built in a 2-story fashion with the required stair and restrooms here, and stair and air conditioning and other components on this end with sort of the dark red, along with this corridor. So phase 1 would be this piece. And then as need arose, you would build the other 10 classrooms on the other side of this wall. It is easier to build a 2-story next to a wall than to try to build 1 story than to try to build it on top. That was an option we looked at, but from a safety standpoint and just the disruption of classes, it's just not a practical solution. You can do that to buildings, but it's not practical, we think, in this case. So the idea would be to do this as a 2-phase project, the second phase in dark blue coming at some point when the enrollment warranted it. All right?
I would like to see parking options for Parkway High School
All right.
as soon as possible based on current land that we're very tight on, and start gathering some information on landowners that surround it, because we all know we've been fighting this parking situation since day one.
Right.
I know you and I have had some discussions about the 15 acres in the back, but let's also have discussions of how far can we get to that silo. We've got concrete pillars in the middle of fields, of grass fields for lights, because the parking was never done.
We actually did some very preliminary layouts to see what kind of quantities you could get in that location. And also, there's a small square on the northeast corner of the student parking lot.
That's still not finished.
That's right.
Yep.
And I think it's maybe 50 or so space, maybe a little bit more than that. But we've done some preliminary layouts, so if you want some layouts, we can update that and bring you some cost estimates.
For our next meeting next month, let's have some real working stuff. Personally, I think the same situation with Benton Middle. I think the wing for Parkway needs to kind of slow the roll, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So let's hold off on any more design concepts for the wing at Parkway High School.
Sure.
But a real and existing problem right now is the parking situation.
Okay. Sure, we can do that.
And whether it be concrete, gravel, whatever, I would like to see something like that. And I think the same situation with Benton Middle. I think we just need to put this wing on hold for Parkway right at this moment until we get some things lined out. Any questions or comments on that from you two? Okay. Good with that. So just to kind of summarize, I know we spent a lot of time on agenda item number 3, the different subcategories you know, the Benton Middle School, we've put that on hold pending the changes that are coming and have been made. We want to just kind of wait that one out a little bit. I think Cope Middle School, we were good moving forward with that. Halton Middle School, we're good moving forward with that. Parkway High School, on hold, just like Benton Middle School.
Parkway, because of the complexity and the size, I would suggest respectfully that a decision be made within a month so that we still meet that
Sure.
end-of-the-year window.
Sure, absolutely. Get us that information about the parking. If we have
Yes,
to
sir.
have another meeting in a couple of weeks, once you get it, you let me know, we'll go from there.
Yes, sir.
Now, from a prioritization standpoint, I would like to see Halton moved up to the next available because I think that's, from a construction standpoint, that's our biggest issue right now. And then Cope right behind it, and then, of course, the other two are on hold. So I don't know if we prioritize or, Mr.
Well,
Norwood?
I don't think it's necessary to prioritize because they'll have their own independent timelines. And you can,
Well, as far as next funds available, go here.
yeah, it's almost, it's an order of magnitude different, so I don't really think that that's really going to be the issue. But as we bring them forward, then we can hold off in the progression if we need to focus just on Halton. What I did was, just to try to summarize, I made a note to add parking improvements to the Parkway item, but I reworded the motion, and let me just read it to you. The committee recommends the Bossier Parish School Board approve the restructure of the 2012 construction program to reflect the list of remaining projects at Cope Middle and Halton High as presented by the program manager. So we're only taking action on those two tonight.
Correct. Ms. Brotherton, did you get that?
I did.
Okay.
Then the second part of that is to submit to the U.S. Justice Department for review and demographic study.
Not yet, hold on. I just want to make sure I'm keeping up with all of our. Now, Mr. Norwood, help me understand, do we need each 3A, 3B? They all need their own individual vote, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that would be most appropriate. So
Okay,
that
do
was 3A that I just read to you.
I'll make the motion as presented by Mr. Norwood to proceed with Cape Middle and Halton High.
Okay, I have a motion for agenda item 3A, approval of revised project allocation. I have a motion by Ms. Smith. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Backhouse. Committee, please vote. Okay. And agenda item 3B, authorization to notify U.S. Department of Justice. Do I have a motion there?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Ms. Smith. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Brotherton. Committee, please vote. Passes. And agenda item 3C, approval of professional services for design. Do I have a motion?
I make the motion.
Motion by Ms. Brotherton, second by Mr. Masura. Committee, please vote.
Question?
Sorry, Mr. Norwood.
Just for clarification, is that just for Halton and Cope?
Per 3A, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so once again, the approval of professional services for design is per the revised 3A. Have the motion and a second. Committee, please vote. Thank you. And I believe we have our other construction updates, and Mr. Babineau, you're on a tight clock. I'll give you about 5 minutes. Start with the HVAC in case we run out of time, please.
Yes, sir. All right. Mr. Norwood, if you'll backtrack a few slides.
Just say when. Let me go to the top and then come
Sure.
back down.
Oop. All right, come back down. A little further, a little further. Keep on going. One more. There you go, right there. Okay. Last week, we sent a performance bond claim to the contractor and its bonding company for reimbursement of the $32,722 in mold remediation cost. And we've got a meeting scheduled with them Wednesday afternoon, and I'll know more after that.
All right, so we've moved forward with what we
forward-
feel is the best
They've been officially notified that there's a claim against them,
against their,
against the contractor and its bonding company. So someone's got to make good on it.
Okay.
So we're just gonna have a conversation with him, next week, and I'll know more after that conversation and report back to you.
Okay, good. I know we've been fighting this for a while, and we pretty
We
much
have.
said, let's do what we need to do.
Right.
Any questions or anything on that, from anybody? Okay, thank you, Mr. Babineau. Go ahead with the last one, as the artificial turf update at Bossier High School.
Go back up, Mr. Norwood, I believe, one
I
slide.
noticed that the turf was back down and everything looked
Yeah.
good out there.
Check your mic. Okay, all right.
Did you have a slide on that one?
Yeah. We'd heard that it's back in the corners, but it's wasn't quite perfect, and so Michael just went and checked it and put a level on it and says it's not tight in the corners, so they got a little bit of tweaking to do yet.
Okay.
It's back, but not as it's supposed to be.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing is, we've also formally notified the contractor and its bonding company of what we call non-conforming work. This is a different situation than at Houghton Middle. Because we're within the the original one-year warranty period, that's what we call it at this point. And this is language out of the contract documents. This is not something we're adding to, it's already included. So they are to correct it at their expense, carry it out promptly, and then we've recommended a kickoff meeting with everyone at the table, talk about what we're going to do and when we're going to do it, and work around the school schedule so we don't impact anything that's going on at the campus. That meeting's not been set up yet. That letter went out after the letter on Houghton, so it's still fairly fresh, but I'll be making a follow-up call with them to try to set that up, and next time we meet, I'll give you an update on that as well.
Yeah, please keep us updated on when
Oh,
that meeting's going to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is an official notification that
Okay.
they got to fix it.
All
Period,
right.
paragraph.
And
I was just
comment, Mr. Masura?
with the non-conforming issue, how intensive would that be, work-wise, time-wise, just in a guesstimate?
The initial conversation I had with the design engineer is we're probably talking maybe about 3 weeks or so. It's not like it's going to take months. It shouldn't. Okay, assuming the weather's cooperative and you know, you're working on 6 or 8 inches of gravel, so I don't see that being a big issue. But that's his basic time frame. But we'll know more after we get a little further along and can update you, but it's not an exorbitant, or shouldn't be an exorbitant amount of time. Okay. Anything else?
Any other questions for Mr. Babineau or Mr. Norwood right now? All right, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank
That
you.
concludes the Building and Grounds Committee meeting.